There's something deeply personal and often painfully confusing about feeling your libido slowly slip away as the years go by, especially when no one warned you that it might happen not in a sudden collapse, but as a quiet fading, a dulling of desire that begins to whisper in your daily life until one day you realize that what once stirred you so easily, be it the soft touch of a partner, the flirtatious memory of a time long ago, or even the simple pulse of vitality in your chest, has grown. Distant, elusive, or even absent. And for so many older adults, especially after 60, this shift feels not just physical, but emotional, a quiet betrayal that leaves them questioning their worth, their identity, and their place in the world of sensual connection. And yet what most don't realize is that low libido in seniors is not simply a result of age alone. It is the result of layered, hidden causes that build up over time and silently chip away at your body's natural drive. Each one fixable if only we knew where to look. And in this journey of rediscovery, it's crucial to understand that low desire doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're no longer capable of intimacy, and it certainly doesn't mean your best days are behind you. In fact, this very shift in your desire might be your body's quiet plea for attention, a call inward to examine what's truly happening beneath the surface, and an invitation to reconnect not just sexually, but spiritually with the parts of yourself that still long for touch, for closeness, for affirmation that your body is still worthy of feeling pleasure and giving in return. Because the truth is, libido isn't just about hormones or sexual appetite. It's about energy, circulation, stress, emotion, belief, and how fully your body feels welcomed into the present moment. And when even one of those areas is off balance, desire can dwindle. Sometimes so slowly you don't even notice until the silence becomes too loud to ignore. And so we begin by acknowledging that the first hidden cause is one that plagues millions without their awareness. Chronic inflammation, the kind that doesn't show up as immediate pain, but as fatigue, stiffness, cloudy thinking, irritability, and yes, a muted sex drive, because when your body is in a state of low-grade internal fire, whether from processed foods, poor sleep, environmental toxins, or years of unaddressed stress, it diverts its precious energy away from reproductive and sexual function toward survival and self-protection, essentially telling your system that pleasure is a luxury it can no longer afford. And unless that inflammation is calmed, your body remains in this defensive mode, suppressing arousal and dulling sensitivity. And the fix here is not a miracle drug, but a lifestyle realignment, beginning with simple changes like cutting back on sugar, processed grains, and fried foods, swapping them for leafy greens, wild-caught fish, turmeric, berries, and plenty of filtered water, while gently reintroducing movement that gets blood flowing to the lower abdomen, like walking, stretching, or even slow dancing alone in your living room, because the pelvic region, rich in nerve endings and blood vessels, must stay alive with circulation to keep libido vibrant. And when it grows stagnant from a sedentary lifestyle, desire withers not from lack of interest, but from physical dormancy. And it's not just about food and movement. Your thoughts matter too, especially when it comes to the second hidden cause, unprocessed emotional grief, because few people associate sadness or long-held emotional wounds with low libido, yet nothing shuts down desire faster than the unresolved pain of loss, abandonment, or betrayal that lingers just beneath the surface, often suppressed because society tells us to move on, to stay strong, to age gracefully without complaint, but your body remembers everything. It holds grief in your chest, shame in your hips, fear in your gut, and all of these block the natural flow of arousal, which requires safety, openness, and trust to awaken. So if you've lost a spouse, survived a divorce, or even just feel abandoned by time itself, It's no surprise that your desire might retreat into the shadows. And the healing here isn't about forcing yourself to get over it, but rather creating sacred space to feel what you've long buried. Maybe by journaling late at night, lighting a candle for the one who's gone, speaking with a therapist or trusted friend, or simply placing your hands over your heart and saying out loud that it's okay to still want connection even after heartbreak because your desire didn't die. It went into hiding, waiting for you to tell it that it's safe to come back. And slowly, as emotional clarity returns, so does the flicker of sensual energy, because the truth is, desire lives not only in your genitals, but in your chest, your breath, your imagination. And when you begin clearing space in those areas, libido finds its way back like a vine reaching for sunlight. And this brings us to the third hidden cause, one that many seniors mistake as a normal part of aging when it's actually a correctable imbalance. Hormonal depletion, not just in estrogen or testosterone, but in DHA, oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin, all of which play vital roles in sexual interest, arousal, mood, and satisfaction. And while hormone levels do change with age, they do not vanish, and their support can be reignited with natural means like strength training, healthy fats, intimacy, and even mindful self-touch, because the body is incredibly responsive to intention. And when you begin treating your pleasure as a form of nourishment rather than an afterthought, your endocrine system perks up, signaling that it's time to reawaken the dormant circuits of libido. And even something as simple as hugging loved ones, cuddling a pet, or receiving a massage boosts oxytocin levels, the bonding hormone that fosters connection and melts anxiety. And without enough of it, the mind becomes skeptical of closeness and the body tightens in self-protection. So touch, whether self-directed or shared, is not just a treat, it is a medicine. And finally, the fourth hidden cause of low libido in seniors is the weight of internalized cultural narratives, the quiet belief that growing older means growing irrelevant, unattractive, or undeserving of sensual joy. And these messages run so deep that even those who maintain physical health and emotional openness still find themselves battling a voice that whispers they should no longer want, should no longer hope, should no longer reach for erotic fulfillment. But that voice is not your truth. It's the echo of a society too afraid to celebrate elder sensuality. And your liberation begins when you challenge it. When you look in the mirror and say, "My age has made me richer, deeper, wiser, more alive." And when you reclaim your right to feel, to touch, to hunger, and to be met in that hunger with compassion rather than shame, because you're not done, not by a long stretch. And the very fact that you're exploring this now proves that a deeper, more integrated form of intimacy awaits. One that honors every wrinkle, every scar, every moment you've lived through and survived, because desire in later life isn't about performance. It's about presence, about merging tenderness with curiosity, about remembering that the spark never dies. It only dims when ignored. And you have every right and every ability to turn it back on. And once you begin to recognize these hidden causes, chronic inflammation, unprocessed emotional grief, hormonal depletion, and the deep-rooted narrative society imposes about aging, you may also begin to realize just how much of your low libido has little to do with personal failure and everything to do with years of misdirection, silence, or cultural conditioning that taught you to disconnect from your own body. Because somewhere along the way, many older adults were told that desire has an expiration date, that intimacy is something to outgrow, and that the aches, fatigue, or quietness of the body are signs that it's time to step away from the table of pleasure. But in truth, your seat at that table is still very much reserved, and the act of sitting down again, of reclaiming your place, requires not only awareness but courage, because while desire is natural, rediscovering it later in life means peeling back years of beliefs, fatigue, and routines that may have numbed you, and replacing them with new rituals, new understandings, and new choices that tell your body you're safe, you're worthy, you're still allowed to feel good. And it begins with tuning in, truly tuning in, perhaps for the first time in decades, to what your body is saying beneath the surface noise of daily life, to whether it's craving more movement or more rest, more touch, or simply more kindness, because libido cannot thrive in an environment of harshness or neglect. And the fix isn't always found in a prescription or supplement. It often starts with something as simple as breath, as returning to your body through conscious awareness. Maybe placing your hands on your chest or lower abdomen and breathing slowly, gently, deeply, allowing that breath to bring life and attention back into the parts of you that have been ignored or dismissed. Because the truth is, libido lives in the nervous system. It is the pulse beneath your pulse, the whisper that arises when your body feels grounded and present, and when your system is in constant stress. Even if you've grown used to it, desire fades like mist, not because it's gone, but because your body is trying to protect you, saying, "Not now, there's danger." And that danger doesn't have to be real. It could be emotional stress, a too long to-do list, worries about your children or your health or your finances. It could be loneliness, it could be boredom. And unless you learn to signal to your body that the danger has passed, that it's okay to relax, your libido may stay tucked away, waiting for the all-clear that never comes unless you create it intentionally through practices like daily movement, mindful touch, talking honestly about your emotions, and reworking the stories you tell yourself about aging and sensuality. And one of the most effective ways to do this is to begin redefining what intimacy looks like in your life now. Not comparing it to your youth, but asking yourself what it could mean today, because many older adults don't realize that libido doesn't always return in the form it once took. It can be slower, softer, more emotional than physical, more about connection than urgency. And when you embrace that evolution instead of resisting it, you allow a whole new form of desire to emerge, one that is rooted in presence rather than performance, one that is sustained by authenticity rather than expectation, and one that often feels even more fulfilling because it honors your current body and heart rather than trying to recreate the past. And this is where so many find their breakthrough, not in trying to get back to how things were, but in discovering how things are now and what possibilities live there in your current skin, in your current rhythm. And that discovery often begins not in the bedroom, but in how you care for yourself during the day, and whether you carve out time to rest, to eat nourishing food, to move your body, to express yourself creatively or emotionally, because all of that feeds your libido like sunlight feeds a garden. And without that nourishment, desire withers, not because you're too old, but because the soil hasn't been tended. And the most beautiful truth of all is that it's never too late to start again, to water that soil, to gently clear away the weeds of shame, regret, or neglect, and to plant new seeds of curiosity, self-love, and attention. And sometimes it's as simple as touching your skin with tenderness instead of indifference, as simple as listening to music that stirs something in you, or allowing yourself to fantasize or remember moments that once made you feel alive, not as a way of escaping the present, but as a way of reconnecting with the emotional pathways that bring pleasure and memory together, because those pathways still exist within you. They're not lost. They're waiting for you to walk them again. And even if it feels unfamiliar or awkward at first, your body remembers what it's like to feel warmth, to feel hunger, to feel aliveness. And the more you allow it, the more those sensations return. Not all at once, but steadily, reliably, and often with unexpected beauty like finding flowers growing through the cracks of a long-forgotten sidewalk. And in those moments, you may begin to feel not only more desire, but more joy, more peace, more connection with yourself and the world around you. Because libido is not a luxury. It is a language, a rhythm, a flow of life force that wants to move through you. And the more you honor it, the more it honors you back, reminding you that you are not fading. You are unfolding, and every touch, every breath, every moment of conscious connection is an act of returning to yourself. Not as who you once were, but as who you've become, wiser, fuller, and more deeply alive than ever. And as you continue on this journey of rediscovery, gently lifting the veil from all the silent factors that have been influencing your libido, you might start to notice how each small act of awareness becomes a spark that slowly reignites the fire within you. Because desire, especially in our later years, is less like a sudden flame and more like an ember that must be protected, nurtured, and given oxygen through attention, curiosity, and kindness. And the more you understand the complexity of what shapes libido, the way your diet feeds or starves it, the way your movement enhances or limits it, the way your emotions cradle or suppress it, the more you realize that reclaiming your sensual energy is not about going back in time, but about embracing your present fully, which includes tuning in not only to your body, but also to your inner dialogue. Because many seniors unconsciously reinforce patterns that sabotage desire, not because they don't care, but because they've been taught to expect less, to ask for less, to believe that sensuality is no longer meant for them. And so their minds repeat phrases like, it's just part of getting old, or I don't need that anymore, or what's the point? Not realizing that every time we think these thoughts, we teach our bodies to believe them. And slowly we shut down the pathways that once led us to joy, arousal, excitement, and connection. But the truth is, the moment you begin to question those thoughts, to lovingly challenge them, to replace them with something more empowering, something like my pleasure still matters, or I can feel desire at any age, or even just I am open to feeling again. Your biology listens because the mind and body are not separate, and when the mind opens, the body follows. And sometimes this shift begins with something as simple as touch, not in a sexual context necessarily, but just in remembering that your skin is still an organ of sensation, still capable of sending messages of safety and warmth to your nervous system. So even placing your hand over your heart each morning, letting it rest there as you breathe slowly, can begin to shift your body from tension to openness, from withdrawal to presence. And as you build this practice of reconnection, you begin to create a life where libido is not a separate thing, but something woven into the fabric of your days. Not dependent on a partner or a perfect situation, but living in your willingness to be here fully in this body now. And that willingness is everything, because another hidden cause of low libido that rarely gets talked about is environmental and sensory deprivation, which may sound strange, but think about how often seniors live in quiet, sterile, or overstimulated environments. TVs blaring but hearts feeling lonely, rooms filled with silence but lacking music, texture, aroma, beauty, or novelty. All things that stir the senses and remind the brain that life is still vivid and rich with potential. Because when your environment feels flat, your internal landscape can begin to mimic it. And arousal, which is rooted in sensory awareness, needs fuel. It needs color, sound, rhythm, touch, and movement. So something as small as wearing a softer fabric, lighting a candle with a scent that evokes emotion, dancing to a song from your youth, or even enjoying a beautifully prepared meal with spices and textures can begin to restore your body's capacity for pleasure, not just in the bedroom, but in every moment. And this practice of awakening the senses leads directly to the next crucial realization. That libido thrives on anticipation and imagination, not just on physical stimulus. And the older we get, the more we need to engage the emotional and imaginative aspects of arousal because the body is slower. Yes, but that slowness is not a flaw. It's an invitation to deepen the experience, to explore what truly excites you. And for many seniors, this means letting go of rigid expectations and embracing new definitions of intimacy, new fantasies, new forms of connection, even with themselves. And yes, this includes masturbation, not as a substitute for partnership, but as a celebration of self-trust and self-love. And when practiced without guilt or rush, it becomes a powerful way to reconnect with your inner rhythm, to learn what still feels good, to explore without pressure, and to signal to your body that you are still listening, still caring, still open to receiving pleasure in all its forms, because pleasure is not a frivolous thing. It's a fundamental human need, one that supports immunity, brain function, emotional resilience, and social bonding. And when it's absent, we suffer not just sexually, but holistically, because libido is a mirror. It reflects the health of your whole life. And if that reflection seems dim, it's not a verdict, it's a message, a signal that something in your system is asking for love, for attention, for change. And that change doesn't have to be dramatic. It can begin with a question: what do I need right now to feel more alive? And the answer might surprise you. It might be less about sex and more about play, about laughter, about being touched without agenda, or simply being seen and heard and accepted exactly as you are. Because when your emotional needs are met, the body begins to relax. And when the body relaxes, desire can return. Not because you forced it, but because you created the conditions for it to re-emerge naturally, like a bird returning to a quiet branch once the storm has passed. And from that place of ease, you may find that arousal becomes easier, not more difficult, that pleasure deepens rather than disappears, and that connection, whether with a partner or within yourself, feels richer than ever before, not in spite of your age, but because of it. Because every moment of experience you carry has made you more capable of deep, mature, generous intimacy. And once you stop chasing a version of libido that belonged to a younger version of you and instead start honoring what your current self needs to feel excited, engaged, and emotionally fulfilled, you step into a new relationship with your desire, one that feels sustainable, expansive, and true. And now that you've begun uncovering these deeper truths, these quiet, often overlooked forces shaping your relationship with desire, it becomes clear that low libido in later life is not a curse or a shameful failure of the body, but a signal, a gentle nudge from your system asking for care, nourishment, and reconnection. And perhaps for the first time in a long while, you begin to recognize that your sensuality is not behind you. It's not something you lost on the road between youth and age. It's simply waiting patiently for you to turn back toward it, to remember it as something sacred and healing and very much alive. Because desire doesn't end with wrinkles or gray hair or the passing of decades. It only goes quiet when we stop feeding it with curiosity, presence, and intention. And as you sit with this truth, a new path opens before you. Not one that demands you reclaim the libido of your 20s or 30s, but one that invites you into a deeper, richer, slower kind of sensuality that reflects the wisdom of a body that has lived, loved, endured, adapted, and still longs for pleasure not as a performance, but as a form of remembrance, of self-love, of celebration. And the most beautiful part of this journey is that every choice you make to care for your libido now, whether through better nutrition, gentle movement, emotional healing, or simply changing the way you speak to yourself, is an act of reclaiming not just your sexuality, but your full aliveness, your sense of vitality, your connection to the world and to others. Because when we ignore our desire, we shrink not just our physical lives, but our emotional and spiritual ones as well. And so by tending to your sensual needs with honesty and gentleness, you begin to rewrite the narrative you've been told about aging, replacing the old myth of decline with a new truth of renewal. Because there is no expiration date on passion, no statute of limitations on pleasure, and no age at which you stop deserving to feel intimately connected to yourself or to someone else. And what's even more important is that when you prioritize this part of yourself, when you water this garden with your time and attention, you don't just reignite physical desire. You also wake up dormant parts of your creativity, your humor, your warmth, and your capacity for joy in the small things, like the way a breeze moves across your skin, the way music fills a room and stirs a memory, the way laughter with a dear friend makes you feel touched without even being touched, because all of it is connected. And when you start living from a place of presence and pleasure, your entire life becomes more vibrant, more meaningful, and more rooted in authenticity. And this shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a gentle unfolding, a steady reclaiming of the self, and it may come with moments of discomfort or doubt or awkwardness as you adjust to new practices, new thoughts, new ways of showing up for yourself. But each time you choose to stay with it, to move through it, to open up a little more, you get closer to the you that has always been there beneath the fatigue, the old beliefs, and the noise of a world that doesn't always make space for elder sensuality. And maybe in doing this, you also give others around you permission to do the same, to talk openly, to seek healing, to feel less alone in their journey. Because your courage becomes a light that guides not just your own transformation, but the healing of a culture that desperately needs more honest, mature, and embodied conversations about aging, intimacy, and wholeness. And the next time you look in a mirror, maybe you won't just see an aging body. You'll see the keeper of stories, of resilience, of tenderness, of unspent desire, still humming beneath the surface, still asking to be honored, still waiting to be touched, not just with your hands, but with your attention, your breath, your willingness to say, I am still here. I still matter. My pleasure is not a relic of the past. It is a right I reclaim in the present. And in that claiming, you become more than your symptoms, more than your numbers, more than the scripts handed to you by medicine or media. You become fully alive again, reawakened to the rich, sensual, emotionally intelligent being you've always been, now with the added depth of time, of perspective, of having made it this far and realizing that nothing has been lost, only waiting to be remembered. And it is in this, remembering that your journey continues, not just as a senior reclaiming libido, but as a whole person stepping fully into the vibrant, tender, and dignified life you still deserve to live with joy, connection, and unapologetic pleasure.